hope what people now understand is the 47th President of the United States is not a game player. When he tells you that he's going to do something, when tells you he's going to address a problem, he means it. He actions it. Like, I don't understand yet how they haven't figured this out. And now, if you don't know, now you know.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, and start making money for the country. Furthermore, under the now deposed dictator Maduro, Venezuela was increasingly hosting foreign adversaries in our region. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Document. I don't know.
And but I think the message here should be for the world. Look, the president doesn't go out looking for people to pick fights with. He's not, generally wants to get along with everybody. We'll talk and meet with anybody. But don't play games. Don't play games with this president's in office, because it's not going to turn out well.
So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious, because that's what we're all about.
Welcome to What's Left, the weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo with co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson, Michael Hoffman, socialist and community college math professor, and socialist Kenny Cepeda. We're online at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle. That is, if any interest, at Don Eduardo Barca. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. We have merch as well. If you would like a shirt, if you fancy a shirt, you can contact us to our site at what'sleftpodcast.com, and Andy will make that order for you. Thank you, Andy, always in the credits. All right, here we go. Venezuela. Yesterday, the topic will be about Venezuela. Yesterday, there was an invasion by the U.S. Into Latin America. It's been discussed throughout the whole year since the Trump administration has gone into effect in January. Anyone want to give us a recount of what has transpired?
Well, I'll start. And first off, I'll say Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah. Happy New Year. Which was the intention of this discussion.
We were going to have a New Year's in review discussion, but apparently the U.S. had other plans. And this is what I think this is possibly an indication of what's to come for 2026. New surprises every week or every month. Well, first off, the background that I want to start with is the U.S. national security strategy, which basically said that the new plan that they're being open about is hemispheric control, reestablishing the Monroe Doctrine, establishing control of South America. And in my opinion, what that has meant is not just mineral resource control, but pushing out any competitors from South America. And that's their plan. And in enacting that plan, they had put a blockade around Venezuela, a maritime blockade, blowing up ships or boats under drug stuff, which is a complete lie, but whatever, that doesn't matter. That's what they were doing. And then they had actually pirated some vessels that actually were oil tankers prior to this operation, and that got people's attention. So there's been an escalation, and then there was even a land attack where they did attack a port in Venezuela. I don't know which port it was, but they said they were going to go to a land attack, and they had done that a few days before this operation. And then December, the night of January 3rd, it was a 2 a.m. attack. It was a special forces operation that had two seemingly combined elements of attacking various airports around Venezuela, attacking sections of Caracas, which I do believe was related to I think what most of they were doing was knocking out surface to air kind of air detection stuff, so they could have free reign over the air. At least that's how I understood it. But at the same time, while that was taking place, a Delta Force operation went into Maduro's home, snatched him and his wife, put him on a boat, the U.S. Iwo Jima or something like that, and shipped him back to the United States, which he's now in the United States, to be tried for drug charges, and he and his wife, drug charges, owning machine guns or something, things like that, just like crazy. Whatever. They're going to try him. I mean, and they're going to use the full law, the justice system on them. I'll just say add these additional things, and people can add one in terms of how. So what? Then the Trump gave a press conference that had Hegseth and Rubio and the dude who headed up the operation, which I can't remember his name. To me, the most interesting things that got said that were what, like, the U.S. was basically saying, look, we're going to be running Venezuela now. This wasn't just like a one and done thing. They're saying, no, this is the beginning of a control operation of Venezuela. We're going to control its oil. We're going to control who it sells its oil to. That was clear. As Brian Berletic said, drugs were mentioned 9 times in the speech. Oil was mentioned 27 times. You get the idea of what it's largely about. But the other interesting thing is like Machado is not going to be doing this. She does not have the ability to rule. We're going to we've been talking to the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez. She's very reasonable. Mark Rubio had a great conversation with her. And I'll just say that, and maybe this is sort of going to maybe give a clue as to where I'm coming from on this. Delcy Rodriguez then gave this seemingly fiery speech among her talking about a national assembly or some sort of national something, a national emergency convening of powers, the judicial branch, the executive branch, the military branch. She had all these people talking about how, denouncing what the U.S. did, saying Maduro is our president. And then 6 or 7 hours later, the Supreme Justice Court of Venezuela basically said, no, you have to be president. And so now she is president. And I find that very interesting. And I think, well, I'll say more about that, but that to me indicates that I believe Marco Rubio is more truthful than Delcy Rodriguez in terms of how this is going to go down. I'll just say that. But I don't want to get into a background until those are some of the meaningful facts that I would put into this. I don't know if anybody wants to add any other information about what's happened that they think would be meaningful before we discuss an analysis, I guess.
I have a question because I've looked. Like, have you had any information as to what's actually happening on the ground? Because like, we live in an age of social media, right? And there is not a lot that I can gather when it comes to like what actually happened, right? Because we saw an operation, because Eduardo mentioned, right, like this was an invasion. I don't know if I would call it an invasion.
It isn't an invasion,
right? Because I don't have a sense of what U.S. assets are on the ground, right? Like, so in the U.S., Trump is talking about running the country, but what kind of military assets? How are they going to exert power? So
let's not answer that question yet, because I think that gets to the analysis of what's going down, I believe. So the U.S. basically said, has what it has. It has its flotilla of ships around it. It has CIA operations on the ground. It has special forces there on the ground in a secret capacity. It has whatever connections it has to the existing Venezuelan government. But beyond that, that's what's there. This is not a invasion. This is I would describe it more as a special military operation.
That's why I'm asking this question, because to me that's kind of asserts the facts of what actually is happening on the ground, right? Like, because then this tells me that there is no U.S. presence. Like, yes, they're being surrounded, absolutely, but the Venezuelan government is still running shit basically within the country.
Yes, right. I just will say one more thing. Russia and China have both made statements condemning this. They both are calling for Maduro to be brought back, just as like Delcy Rodriguez is doing. That's about it.
I will still call it an invasion because I think that I'm just using the rhetoric that the Trump administration does when it talks about immigrants invading a country. And it's just like, I don't think that's an invasion either. So it's just sort of I don't know, I'm just trying to have the parallel sense of, one country influence over another, and not just influence, but actual entering with a military, parade. Can I just, if it's all right, if we can just get reactions to it, Andy?
Okay. Michael, do you want to add any facts to this that you?
Oh, right.
I will, in relation to facts, I will just say that I've found it difficult to find much directly from Venezuelan people, period.
Correct.
So that to me also tells me something, that it feels actually much harder to find out what's going on now than it did, back when they tried to overthrow Chavez.
Well, can I say one thing about that, though?
But I do want to say that there was one interview with a guy who was a professor who was clearly a leftist, and he's basically saying there's calm in the streets, the government's in control, the people back the government.
Yep.
But then I didn't see any images of mass rallies.
Correct. And I want to add,
like none, which is surprising. So
right.
In terms of facts, I have things to say that, meaning like I can just contribute that there's not that much evidence about what's going on the ground now.
Right. And
for me, I haven't seen it.
Add that the biggest thing that the government has called for, in addition to the restoring Maduro, was actually, we want to see evidence of his being alive. That's what they kept on saying. And they definitely said, we asked the people to remain calm. And the person who headed up the national constituents, the thing that is those national assemblies, came out and literally said exactly the same thing Delcy Rodriguez said, which is remain calm, and we want to see Maduro alive.
I will say there have now been photos released of Maduro in New York being walked by agents.
Yep.
And
so
there have been images that at least seem to confirm that he is still alive and in custody.
He is, definitely. And so then we can get to analysis, because I've learned a lot from this event.
I want to start from the onset of what's I think the reaction, and then I think we can get into analysis, if that's all right. Well, I think first, you go to sleep and you think that you're going to wake up in the morning having to go to work, and you suddenly, it feels like Syria all over again when Obama bombed Syria, and I am like thinking in the morning as I'm going to work, it just brought me flashbacks to that time. Is this another? Are we entering another war? How, like, suddenly out of nowhere, we just suddenly bombed Syria? I remember that. I remember clearly in the morning feeling that sense of, here we go. And that's, again, this yesterday morning feeling that, like, oh, shit. And then suddenly we're all awake, everyone from my South American community, especially the Venezuelan community. And I post something about how I think that this is an invasion, or how I think this is something that another intervention, and all of the text messages start coming in from friends and opposing anything I'm saying. I think the sentiment, the strongest sentiment that there is people wanted Maduro down. They wanted him gone. They just were done with him. They could not stand him. And as most people have that I've spoken with have said, the strongest sentiment is anybody but Maduro. And it's awful because anybody could mean who, and they're talking about Maria Corina Machado. Is she in power? She's not in power. It's Delcy Rodriguez. She's a part of the Chavismo. And she is the vice president. And a lot of people are speculating she's the one who turned in Maduro. So I'm wondering, where is, and I asked my Venezuelan community, where is this change? Where is Maria Corina Machado? I thought she was supposed to be the leader and to be put in power so that she can lead the country. But that's not what is being discussed right now. The people I'm discussing with, everyone's happy. I mean, there are a few people that have been affected. I have a friend whose family has a home in Caracas that has been affected. I have another friend who has his partner's niece is in the academy, and she wasn't in the academy in Caracas, and her fellow classmates have been affected. I don't know if they're dead or not. I haven't checked in. There's a lot of messages I have to respond to. But she's in Cojedes, el estado de Cojedes, that the state of Cojedes. So she was saved from that bombardment. And I try to have discussions. I really do try to have discussions. And I'm getting so upset with so many because it reminds me of the time Bukele was elected into power. And I had discussions with my Salvadorian community, and everyone was saying, you haven't been to El Salvador, even though I have. You don't know, you don't understand, you don't know what the sentiment is of dealing with the narco state, and we want change. And that's the same thing I'm hearing today. It's the same tactic I keep hearing over and over again about how you're not Venezuelan, you wouldn't know, you don't live there, don't explain Venezuela to Venezuelans. And then my partner is having the same position. It's like his heart is so rejoiced that Maduro's down, but his intellect is like, this is not going to go well after we've had long discussions and we've been reading The Open Veins of Latin America by Eduardo Galeano. And, in the long run, a largo plazo, in future, what is at stake here is the sovereignty of a nation, of the people. Whatever that might look like, it depends on what that people call for, but that's not what is going to happen. It's going to be determined by, as we know, U.S. American interests. We've seen this in 1989 in Panama, by the taking over the canal. We've seen this in 1970s in Chile. We've seen this with the support of the Contras in Nicaragua. And we've seen this by the backed coup, by the U.S. backed coup in Honduras, Celaya, and Puerto Rico. I keep saying all these examples, and I'm asking my Venezuelan people, hermanos, where is the proof that U.S. intervention has ever worked? Can you show me? I'd like to see it. Tell me one country that this has worked. I'd like just one country, just one. The islands of Samoa? I don't know. They're pretty fucked over there too. And I ask everyone, and no one can tell me one. And some people are preparing the argument because I'm preparing for a panel, a conversation to be had on what's left, where Kenny's going to be on it, whether he wants it or not. And I'm saying to people, I want people to share with me where has it worked? And so you asked the question, Michael, where you don't know what's happening on the ground. Well, I can only tell you from the people I'm surrounded by, which is 200 Venezuelans in my life, mostly from different levels.
A question about that, Eduardo, real quick.
Yeah.
Those people are mostly outside of Venezuela now, right?
And some are in Venezuela. A few are in Venezuela. The people that are largely, are outside of Venezuela, largely. Colombia, Spain, the USA, Mexico, Chile. That's where most of them are from right now. And very few, I'm still in contact with them, are in Venezuela. And they are rejoicing the people who I'm speaking about are the family of my partner. They're rejoiced. They're happy. They're saying, yes, go down Maduro. But when you have discussions with them and you say, wait, hold on. Okay, then replaced with what? After this, what? What then? And the question lingers because it's like, well, blah, 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 well, we'll just hope something better. But anything but Maduro. Okay, let's go back to this. But you're not Venezuelan. You don't live here. Okay, but give me an argument. And it keeps going that way over and over and over and over again. And like I tell my friend Freddie, who I understand it's hard, he says to me many, many times, stop taking away our victory. This victory isn't for you, Freddie. This victory was a US American victory. Understand that. That was for them. But we've been having 25, 26 years of oil being given to Iran, to China, to Russia. I'm like, yeah, but those were deudas. Those were debts that were having to be paid. That I'm not agreeing that you have to pay those debts, honestly. But I mean, those were the compensation that you all had, and those contracts with those countries. That's not what this is. And then, oh yeah, but you don't understand the suffering. How much time will be suffering? That's a systematic issue. There's suffering here in Mexico as well. You come from your privileged self. I'm not privileged. I live in America, in Latin America. I also experience all the things that are happening here. And maybe, yes, my family upbringing, maybe that is a privilege. My middle class background, that's a privilege. I get that. Kenny and I have discussed that as well. But what about the actual friends? And I don't know if you know him, Kenny, but what about the actual friends in my community, like Kevin Solis from Nicaragua, who have been tortured by the Ortega government, who is in exile right now, not by immigration. He didn't go there. He was pulled out of torture, aislamiento, from isolation to the USA, and he is against the US imperialism agenda. And isn't that someone that you wouldn't call that someone who would have weight in this matter because he's not Venezuelan? So I'm just wondering, these are the conversations I'm frustrated about. And I think this isn't a conversation I think I have to convince the three of you. Obviously, we're in agreement about being anti-imperialist. This is mostly for our fourth co-host, which is our audience, who seem to think, especially from the Trump camp, that seem to think that this is great because I thought this was America first. And I thought Trump was supposed to be the president of peace. I thought he was supposed to stop these interventions and regime changes. That's what I thought. So anyone who's listening, and I know a few who are actually listening, who are MAGA folk, and where the fuck are your principles? Where are they? I thought it was about America first. And it's like, we're not. We're now in Nigeria. We're now in Asia. We're now in Latin America. And we're all over the world. So, I mean, it's always been that way. But I thought that was what Trump was supposed to be different about. So anyhow, there's a lot I'd like to say more, and I can go on and spill more. I'm really angry because I just don't know how people, the working class, because that's what I keep telling my Venezuelan community. I'm not Chavista. I'm not Venezuelan, but I'm Latino. I'm beyond Latino. I'm working class. We are part of the working class. And I think we have to be in solidarity about this because guess what? The gringos, the US, not you two, but the US American state are not about one country. They're about multiple. Their greed doesn't go beyond one. It's just two or three. It's like, I want more. Give me more of that cookie jar, and I want more than one cookie. So of course they're going to come after every other country. So this actually is about Guatemala, Mexico, Bolivia, Panama. This is about all of us. And as far as I can tell, from last I read, Greenland should be worried as well. So I don't know. These are my thoughts to begin with. This is my rant. And I appreciate you, the four of you, listening, speaking to the audience as well as if they're here. So I don't know if you all want to say something to that.
I do. Well, first off, I thought I just learned one thing from these events, and I've learned two things. One thing about state of the capitalist class, U.S. capitalist class, that I was wrong about. And another thing about the state of the international working class that I was hoping there might be a little bit more hope. Now I have less hope. And I think I've learned something about the state of the South America, well, at least the Venezuelan working class. Start with the thing I was wrong about. I remember saying that the U.S. had all these soldiers and boats out there, had to do something, but that if it did do something, it was going to be caught in a trap. That's what I remember saying. I remember saying this was going to be their new Vietnam, and that the Russia and China were going to let them do this. And now, could it play out that way in a few years? Possibly. I know that when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, it killed the president, and it didn't immediately uncork for them. It took a few years for the U.S. to start to funnel the weapons in there to turn Afghanistan into that trap. So could that happen? Maybe. But the idea that Vietnam scenario was going to develop, I will say is, well, I was wrong about that. Like that, now I see something differently now, because what I didn't take into, well, I did not take into account what the implications were for the level of corruption in the Venezuelan ruling class. And what that level of corruption means is you can do a decapitation, because all you have to do, all those corrupt leaders need is who's going to rule. Like, just allow me to rule comfortably. Oh, you got to remove Maduro, and now you can hang out with Delcy Rodriguez and let me run your oil operation for you. No longer China, because all those agreements were reached with China, with the Maduro government. Now I guess it's Delcy Rodriguez, who has a really close connection. Well, she has been running the oil operations in Venezuela, and she has built close connections to the Republican Party in the United States. I'm your gal. And so now I actually think the sanctions can be lifted and things like that. And people's lives could seemingly get better, at one level get better, because sanctions can be lifted as long as that oil is controlled by the United States. So I guess they can do a decapitation. The only thing that would have made it not possible is the response of the Venezuelan working class in relationship to that. And what I think is going on is the same thing that's going on in this country. Hope for Obama, and hope dashed. And then that hope turns into, oh, let's get Trump then. Hope for Trump and hope dashed. Oh, well, then let's take Biden. Hope for Biden, hope dashed. And let's go to Trump again. Hope for Trump again. Hope dashed. Well, let's go for the next thing. Like this little ping pong game of these politics of despair that play out between the two-party politics. That looks like it's literally exactly what's going on in Venezuela in a different type of uniform. Because if people believe that, like, if Donald Trump can literally give a press conference and say, we're running the country, this is our oil that you stole from us, and poke the Venezuelan working class in the chest, and all that Delcy Rodriguez has to do is come out and say, oh, I'm opposed to that, but I'm actually going to become the president. And I'm not going to in any way speak to Marco Rubio saying that he talked with me yesterday and it was all good, which is what I believe happened. Then and there not be any sort of uproar and any sort of, if there's a wait and see attitude on the part of the Venezuelan working class with regards to its own government, then there's not going to, like, the U.S. has won. That's what I'll just say. This was a big victory for the United States, and they're not going to pay the price, at least in the short term, that I thought they were going to pay. And this is going to be a big victory for them. And what it does, what it will also mean is that the state of the working class in the United States can be generalized across the globe. Like, it's that way in Europe, it's that way in South America. I'm just going to assume it's that way in Asia. We're fucked across the globe right now. So it's not like, one of these things I've been wondering is what's going to happen somewhere else that might be a lesson for the U.S. working class. I need to put that aside now. Like, I need to say we are just going to have to do something. Like, and if we don't do anything, don't expect some other sector of the working class somewhere else to give us some sort of object lesson that will help us figure out how to get out of this. And I just think I have to really grapple with the fact that we either do this or we don't. And that's how it feels right now. But I have to say, just full stop, I was wrong about what was going to happen in Venezuela. The trap the U.S. was in And I think they have had a glorious victory, not unlike what they did in Syria. Although there's problems now developing in Syria, I actually think their situation is better here in Venezuela because of their long-term relations with in the region, and the fact that they've had like School of Americas. Like, this operation clearly was done with the collaboration of the Venezuelan military, and I do believe with the Venezuelan ruling class. Like, they went ahead and said, "Okay, take that guy out. We'll be your puppets," without being obvious puppets, but it's fairly obvious. And to the extent that the Venezuelan working class is going to act like, "We don't really know. We're going to wait and see," they're pretty much saying, "We just want the boot off our neck of sanctions. If the U.S. is willing to lift sanctions, we'll just be their bitch," basically. And that's what's going to happen now. And I don't just mean that Rodriguez is saying that. That's what the Venezuelan working class is saying. Like, we're prepared to be anybody's bitch right now, which is the state of the U.S. working class as well. It's just that that's a generalized situation. That's what I say. That's what I see right now.
I share that frustration that Eduardo has. I had that similar kind of emotion when Nicaragua was happening in 2018, because in retrospect, I see more of an American involvement. And at the time, I analyzed the U.S. kind of being hands off and seeing what would happen. And so, just for context, the Christian socialist Ortega family, they're still in power. They've been in power for the majority of the last 20 plus years. And in 2018, masses of people mobilized. They try to topple him, and that anger was justified. I lived in Nicaragua. I observed the corruption of the state. The democratic socialist state, whatever bullshit. And the point is that I'm trying to make by bringing that up is that he's still in power today. When I was there, living there, I saw the deep financial connections that happened between the U.S. and Nicaragua. Even though in public rhetoric, Ortega was aligned with Venezuela, with Cuba, with Iran and all that shit. But they're still in power. And the point is that they are in power because the U.S. that's the dictator the U.S. wants in Nicaragua. That's it's bullshit. When Chavez was in power, there was some more moves to gain some sort of independence through the energy partnerships, because Nicaragua, when Chavez came into power, Venezuela was able to give Nicaragua energy consistency, because there were rolling blackouts in the capital city prior to that partnership. And so, but the point I'm trying to make is that, again, the people that are in power, and if you're not aligned, this moment is not just about Venezuela, right? Yes, it's about Latin America. This is a message. We'll come and get you in your fucking, pajamas if we have to, if you don't get in fucking line, because we're about to go to war. Prior to this, I insisted that the U.S. cannot achieve, what they need to achieve to compete against, China, Russia, without Venezuelan oil. And it became clear to me that they needed people on the ground to come into the new project, right? And it's obvious now that that's what happened, because there was no battles. There was no battle. Like, what I see, yes, there was bombardment, but it was one-sided. It was a fucking show just to go get Maduro, get him out, to show force. But there was no real battle, even though there was a lot of posturing of the Venezuelan civilian forces that were given weapons and all this shit, and nothing happened really, and that's not to blame people, because the obvious truth also is that there is an overwhelming firepower that the U.S. possesses, and that they can do a lot of damage, and that's what we're facing. Anyone who wants to change the world, that's the shit that you're facing. And so I don't know if I want to, criticize people, like that are in Venezuela, whatever actions they took, whatever. But the obvious thing is here that the game is being played at the top, And the other obvious thing is these constituent assemblies that supposedly give Venezuelan a better democracy, that a lot of leftists fucking talk about and love about Venezuela. That's the result. Nothing happened. They're fucking in line. They're being ruled by the party, that's ruling. And so this illusion of better democracy than America is fucking a farce too, just like it is in Nicaragua. And so and yes, I agree. Like there is again the Game of Thrones within Venezuela, right? And the Venezuelan ruling class also want to get out of this unscathed. They don't want to fucking Libya. They don't want to Syria. They have plenty of examples. So what the evidence, at least so far, what I see is that everything is under control. It's not, and people are gonna follow the rules that the party. And if you don't, you're gonna be tortured. You're gonna be fucking put away, like they do it in Nicaragua. Like they've done in Venezuela. And like they do in many countries. It's not just these countries, right? Like I don't want to also paint this picture that they are unique in this shit, because we have our version of that shit here. Of pressuring people to do. If you go against the powers, right? Like it's just a little more naked down there, I guess. And so, yeah, I agree. Like, this is a massive victory for the U.S. It's a message to the world. It's also a message to not underestimate, how, because, like you, Lipson, I thought that there wasn't danger there to be caught in a situation long term. But it's obvious that, the bribes and the deals were made, and kumbaya, I think, Maduro is history now. Fuck, he's done. And it's obvious that it's about the oil, and they're willing to play game. And this new leader, that is gonna quote unquote manage this transition, she's been in charge of the energy department, of Venezuela, who has the biggest oil reserves in the world. And yeah, it's fucking hard to refine, but still, it's better to have that than Saudi Arabia, who can also, like, Milan, like, is playing both sides, of the world stage. They're also hedging their bets, like anyone should, right? Like at this moment in history. And so what this tells me is, like, also confirms this idea that we are heading to war, a bigger war, and because they just aligned their ducks in Latin America, which one fucking swift move, because, like Colombia is also on site, even if it's just like a carrot and a stick being held, right, like in front of everybody else. Like if Venezuela fell, so easily, then you can also go at any moment. And so better give us our fucking resources that we need for our, imperial project and our imperial war, or you'll be gone.
I want to bring in the the liberal line, which is something that I was so surprised at how kind of angry and despairing I felt after watching this liberal Heather Cox Richardson talk about the Trump campaign. Partially, it's because this person who's like a inside ball liberal Washington type, who has like a Substack following. Anyway, the narrative that they're putting out is, first of all, Maduro was a bad guy. Okay, everybody, we just Maduro was bad, which I had been hearing actually, from
Bad hombre.
he's a bad hombre, right? And honestly, I have not, like, in terms of what gets thrown up by the, it gets sort of pushed in my face. I don't really have that strong of evidence for it. Like, I'm like, I don't even see, like, they're not even, like, nothing they're talking about seems real, like they're not even, I don't know, So first thing to say, though, is that the liberal line is Maduro is bad. And the main problem here is the way that Trump did it, right? It's that he didn't even ask Congress. And they're also saying, shocking, that the U.S. is shredding the global rules-based order under Trump. And for some reason, no, I kind of know why, but this just made me so angry. Like, I mean, like when was the U.S. respecting the global U.S., the global rules-based order doesn't the whole experience with Gaza, like the most recent thing, kind of show like the U.S. doesn't give a shit about the rules-based order? So in the framework of the liberals right now in the U.S., who I believe are hegemonic over the, they are hegemonic over the traditional left, meaning like the organized bodies of the left and political, progressive political formations like unions and nonprofits. Their narrative is that these guys are really bad and Trump is more like Putin than the Democrats. Like, so they kind of equate Trump and Putin and make it seem like basically Trump is sort of like this foreign entity imposing all of these just outlandish, breaking the rules. Whereas we understand when you actually look at what occurred, Obama is the one who I believe really started ramping up sanctions against Venezuela. Right? So the liberal idea is that there's no continuity really between administrations, that this is all about Trump. And here's something I have a question about, which is they also claim that it has to do with his poor poll numbers internally, that he's doing this because his poll numbers are bad within the United States, which I might have given that more credence at one point, because it does seem like politicians do that, like launch a war as soon as things get really. But the more that we look into the actual planning that goes into U.S. policy, that these things are planned out and then executed, you're like there's not, the president isn't just doing something that they just thought up last week, or even thought up last year. I mean, they are implementing different options that had already been explored and vetted and developed and worked on for years. So it's really angering to me that this is still this is still the dominant narrative. But I mean, and I had the same thought as Andy, which is that when I saw the emergency demonstrations were all really small in the U.S., people don't seem to care. I mean, and I think it has a lot to do with, well, there's multiple reasons for that, but if there's a lot of outrage, it doesn't take any kind of organized form. It doesn't take, and it gets absorbed into all this, like, Washington chess match, which actually, honestly, just numbs your brain and makes you bored and feel hopeless. I mean, like that's the impact of these supposedly really smart, sophisticated liberals who are going to explain to you the meaning behind Trump's, attack on Venezuela. I don't see a vibrant fight back, and the fact that we're not seeing pictures of like big crowds or battles in the streets in Venezuela, to me, means they're either consciously preventing us from seeing that, or they're not happening. But I also want to admit that I don't know, and I don't think we can claim confidently that there's not. It's not clear to me that there's not some real resistance to this. And I feel like, given what happened in the not too distant past in Venezuela, like, do we agree there really was like a popular uprising that essentially defended Chavez? I mean, that's what it seemed like. So that same working class is just taking this now. I don't know if that's true. I wouldn't accept that. I wouldn't build my entire theory on that, but I know within the U.S. working class, all the anger is very effectively bottled and disorganized.
Yeah, and I'm saying Chavismo, to the extent that it represents anything, is dead.
I don't want to dismiss the people that have been out on the streets in 2024 after Maduro was elected and I've been saying Maria Cochina because she's supportive of the genocide. Cochina means like, how would you translate that, Kenny? Like pig. But Maria Corina Machado, I don't want to dismiss that. And we discussed, and I got emotional in one of the episodes when we discussed that. I admire people that put their lives on the line and have fled Venezuela since. And I was having the discussion with someone who actually has been in the midst of those fights and would treat people as they were injured, frontline, during those protests. Many people I know their parents have been incarcerated simply because they voted or because they posted something online. There was a lot of censorship in 2024. It was like just yesterday, but it's been 2 years ago as of January 2026. So I respect that, but we're that same anger, that same vision for a renewed Venezuela is not the displacement or the no that not displacement, the complacency that we have now with this new administration coming in. And that's what I'm fearing. And you talked about the liberals, Michael. I'm seeing a chat by what's her name? What's her face? Kamala Harris, right here. Where's she? She's right here. I'm going to share. She decided to enter the chat. So let's see what Miss Kamala Harris has said. We talked about the liberals, right? You said here she is with a little Christmas picture. And here she is. Donald Trump's actions in Venezuela do not make America safe, stronger, or more affordable. That Maduro is a brutal, illegitimate dictator. You always have to say that first. Just like you say with Israel, they have the right to defend themselves, and then you talk about the Palestinian atrocities. That Maduro is a brutal, illegitimate dictator does not change the fact that this action was both unlawful and unwise. We've seen this movie before. Onyx, wars for regime change or oil that are sold as strength but turn into chaos, and American families pay the price. All right, here she is about the American people do not want this, and they're tired of being lied to. La la la. This is not about drugs or democracy. It's about oil and Donald Trump's desire to play the regional strongman. I'm having a hard time reading her fake ass. If he cared about either, he wouldn't pardon a convicted drug trafficker or sideline Venezuela's legitimate opposition while pursuing deals with Maduro's cronies. The president is putting troops at risk, spending billions, destabilizing a region, and offering no legal authority, no exit plan, and no benefit at home. America needs leadership, don't we all? Whose priorities are lowering costs for working families, enforcing the rule of law, strengthening alliances, and most importantly, putting the American people first. And check out my Christmas picture. So I am wondering, those words sound like what happened during the Biden administration when Israel was attacking Palestine. And where did she say all these words at that time? Yep. Where's all that? Where is it? When did she say that? That sounds a lot like what we needed back during the conflict in Israel, from Israel to Palestine. That is what I'm saying. That is the hypocrisy by the left, because they didn't say anything then. The liberal left was complicit in all those atrocities. I will say there was a split in the American public, even amongst the right. And I have to say, I applaud those splits. And I applaud that even today, there's now breaking away from the Republican base. The Republican base has a split. And so there should be some credit to that. But I'm thinking about everything we've been discussing. And I think this is a moment for people to really think about how when you align yourself with the Republican right or with the Democratic left, the hypocrisy is parallel. It's the same on both sides. And this is a time, of course, for Kamala Harris to say, and her support for no dictatorships and for not going into Venezuela, to speak about the other administration. And it goes like ping pong, just like that. Because it's about who is the better person here? And it's not really. They're both the same. They did it under the Biden administration, over the Obama administration, over the Trump administration. And like I said to Freddie, my friend, who I understand, He's been on the line. He was helping people recuperate. He was with doctors, tending to wounds, people being shot at. And I said, but this still is about us. It comes down to us, nuestra lucha, our struggle, our fight. You can't allow someone else to come in and suddenly decide that they want to clean house for you. Oh, but they already did it in Iran, China, Russia. They already come in. So what? Where's that post, by the way? I want to show people what the attacks that I get sometimes about people telling me. Here it is. So this is what I'm told constantly. But we've been here for 25 years. And I've seen this post over and over and over again. I laugh at the fact that you say that they're coming for oil. When we've already had, yeah, but so what? Te da risa, te debería dar vergüenza. That's what we should be having. We should not be happy or complacent with like, okay, well, they've already been here. Should we allow for more? No. And what was it? Kenny or Michael, who said it? This is an entry for more. And so I imagine with more wars, World War III and where we're at, that we're going to see an escalation of this. And sooner or later, China and Russia are going to say, hold on, no more. You've taken enough countries. We're going to have some of your chessboard pieces as well. And we're going to need some of those and what's going to happen at that point, we're going to have a real major escalation that I don't think people are taking seriously. They don't think we're in World War III.
Can you do me a favor, Eduardo? Can you put that picture up there again?
Yeah,
What
let me hide the name of the.
Can we
several.
Can we describe it for our listeners?
Here we go.
Yeah, I'll say what I see. So you've got the Xi Jinping, Putin, Cuba, and looks like the president of Iran sucking up the oil of Venezuela, right? And the implication of this is, and I don't see the United States there. I just see other people, other rulers sucking that oil up.
Can I translate the quote real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Kenny. Go ahead.
It says, "I laugh when they tell me the gringos want oil,
right.
And then these other people are sucking up the oil from Venezuela."
And I want to talk about that because I think there's something very important.
Finish the translation, Kenny.
Yeah, and we have 25 years of China, Russia, Cuba, and Iran sucking the oil from us. Yep. Basically, that's what the picture is saying.
Go ahead.
So anything more? Because I want to say something about that's exactly what I want to talk about. This is okay. Chavismo is socialism, 21st century socialism. That's what Chavismo really is. It's the idea that socialism in the 21st century has a new kind of it's got a national branding to it, but it's certainly centered in the working class and occupations of refineries and occupations of constituent assemblies, organizing occupations of workplaces. It's centered around the working class, and it has a defiance to it, and there is a cost. There is a cost to the working class when that working class independence that was there was an element of that independence was there in Chavismo, essentially sells itself to the existing government, which is, I won't even call it, let's not even call it brutal. Let's not call it a dictatorship, but I'll call it corrupt. I will say that the people in that government are there on the basis of being bought and paid for by money from someone. And whether that money comes from China or Russia or Cuba or Iran or the United States, it don't matter. As long as that money comes in, and as long as I can pay somebody underneath me and control them by the connection to that money, and as long as my connection in government goes to somebody above me, whether that above me is China, Russia, Iran, Cuba, or the United States, I don't give a fuck. I just need that. Once once you call that government with any sort of gloss of call it some version of socialism, you're done. Then people rightly call bullshit on what are you talking about socialism? What are you talking about? These motherfuckers, I'm not going to call them even dictators. I'm going to say he never tortured anyone. I'm going to say he never put through anyone wrong in prison. Don't even worry about it. I'm just going to first call him corrupt. What that means is socialism is corrupt. Socialism can be bought and sold like everything else. And we're back to our problem again. We're back to the fact that the socialism that said you've got to get in line for a shot with Pfizer is a fraud. You've got to get in line that says the socialism that promotes fourth industrial revolution and data analytics in China is a fraud. The socialism that supports Russian invasion of Ukraine is a fraud. The socialism that basically says, "Oh, I'm with Maduro because he's opposing the United States, but he's totally connected to another ruling class and that is completely corrupt," is a fraud. It means once we as revolutionaries accept that kind of thing as socialism, we're done, and we are leaving people nothing other than hopelessness of being the ping pong between the blue versus the red. Do I want to be run by Delcy Rodriguez or Machado? Because let's be clear, right? Like, okay, don't get Delcy Rodriguez. Well, bring in Machado then. Well, who's Machado going to be listening to? The United States is the same player, and it's not a question of, oh, aren't you so stupid? It's the question of we literally have no alternative. We revolutionaries have offered no alternative to the existing system. They've just said, whose bitch are you going to be? Are you going to be Xi Jinping's, Putin's, the Ayatollahs, or are you going to be United States' bitch? Decide. So that's the situation we're in. And that's why I say Chavismo is dead. Because I do believe socialism as international socialism as a revolutionary possibility currently is dead. It's dead in the way that it is dead in the United States. Like we're literally trying to rebuild anything here. I believe that's the situation across the globe. That the situation is no better in Europe than it is here, or Argentina, or Venezuela, or Bolivia, or Taiwan, or Vietnam. I'm just going to make that claim. Now, I will say that if something emerges in the next months that Delcy Rodriguez can't handle, then I'm going to reassess. That means there's something on the ground. But based on what I see here in the United States and based on the description that Eduardo's giving me, that sounds so similar to the ping pong match that is happening here that gets us nowhere. There's no energy there. It's just literally going from one position of despair to another. Then it sounds like to me like that the working class in South America is caught in literally the same trap that the U.S. working class in the United States is. It's unfortunate, but that's what I'm going to say. And I think that cartoon is entirely right. Entirely right. I'm 100% with that cartoon.
And that's what I was going to say in terms of, the people, right? Like why they're giving that opinion. And I think there's actual logic in that, that the left refuses to recognize, like that, oh no, you had to keep romanticizing these fuckers who like are examples of shit that's not working, right? Like in that they haven't provided, and yeah, you have to also consider that there has been reasons and war making, right? Like but that's the reality. We have to accept that. I would say socialism wasn't just dead now. It was never there for me. In the Ortegas, in Krishners, in the Lula da Silva, in all these fuckers that have come across in the last 20 years, right? In the peak wave in Latin America, right? Because and I don't know what else to offer. All I know is to recognize that that's not it. It hasn't been. It has been, again, just a fucker with a straw, like in this cartoon, and people recognize that. So and so the logic goes then, if these fuckers are sucking us dry, why not get close to the US, because they might make us rich? That's what a lot of people look at it. That was the logic in Nicaragua too. When like Nicaragua was, Ortega regime was tumbling, millions of people were on the streets. Like half the country was marching on the streets in a small country, but it was like more than half the country. And I didn't understand it then, and there is a bit of naivete, I think, and lack of understanding for a lot of people, because they were calling for the United Nations, for example, to come and intervene. So there is a lack of understanding of the big picture, but there is logic in that demand of like, might as well make some money, might as well get close to the capitalism that could make us rich. And that's why there is logic too to the people who come to the United States, Nicaraguenses, Cuban Americans. There will be a big Venezuelan Americans who, oh, America is great, fuck those dictators, because over here there is credit, and so you have to consider this thing as to why people give you this opinion. And I agree, they're not completely wrong, but the problem is I'm not trying to defend Maduro regime. What I'm trying to explain is that, look, there is a big picture here, and you have to consider how you're going to be pawned in this game, right? Because the consequences can be atrocious, right? Like look at Libya, look at Syria, look at all these places, right? Afghanistan, Iraq, and so I don't know. Again, I don't know what to tell people in Venezuela. I don't know what to tell people in El Salvador, because they're also seeing, a difference El Salvador with Bukele, right? It's the same shit. Yes, there is a lot of fucking same corruption. There is, like a dictatorship that is putting people away with a broad net. But for a lot of people, that's good because I've known people who have lost their cousins in front of their house. They're being shot down by the Maras. And so what I'm saying is like, I understand why people want some relief. What I'm also saying is that there is no relief in this system. There's just going to be a piece that will be expendable in the shit that's coming. And if we don't take control, then, like democratic control, the masses don't take control, we're all in the chopping block. That's what I'm saying. So fuck Maduro, fuck the United States. We have to find a way outside of this dynamic that we're just pawns in.
Yeah, I just want to say that cartoon, to Kenny's point, is incomplete. It's not that. I mean, that cartoon actually expresses the U.S. liberal analysis, and it makes invisible the U.S., right? Which is, even this, this. I really don't. The anti-Maduro, like the good reasons for the anti-Maduro sentiment, is not obvious to me, and maybe that's just my ignorance. But I know that as soon as I'm being told who to hate, there's some very specific reason. And even this idea that, like Maduro crashed the economy. Maduro was basically right before he got captured, like, we'll sell oil to the United States. Venezuela never stopped selling oil to the United States. They never stopped. Chavez just basically regulated it more. I mean, they nationalized the oil in like 75 or something like that. And then when Chavez came in, he basically said, and now we have to have more direct control over, but the oil, there was oil going from Venezuela to the United States, people making money, getting rich, buying from Venezuela, selling in the US market. That is something that never stopped. Right? So this idea that, there's this evil empire that, the US is counteracting, right, is exactly the liberal narrative that says like, well, Trump is really bad, but it's just because he's doing empire wrong, right? That there's something we can salvage in this empire, right? And it is, like Andy's saying, very much like here we're caught between like two empires, and like some of us are saying, no, this one's good, no, this one's good, but honestly, the main thing that this shouts to me is impunity. That the days of there being any kind of real idea of international solidarity, and now I believe, my prediction is, Cuba's not long for the world. Meaning, like the Cuban regime is losing pillars of support now. The Cuban regime is, very clearly, explicitly in their sights. And what the U.S. was able to do was essentially put enough pressure, I think, on, and this is what we talked about before, because when Andy was predicting it was going to be the next Vietnam, I was, skeptical, but only because I didn't have evidence. And I still don't have a lot of evidence that there's like a break from within the military. There wasn't like a right-wing break within Venezuela. There really was, what it seems like, was a liberal capitulation to do business. And they were never not doing business. I mean, this is the thing. That it's not like suddenly the U.S. now has access to oil they didn't have access to. No, they want political control about who gets it, which is why when we were talking about this before, this is the distinction. It's not that the U.S. wants the oil. The U.S. wants to control who does and does not get the oil.
Correct.
So, what this represents is very interesting to me. And it does, I think Andy's right in that it represents the real decay of even the semblance of those remnants of like the nationalist revolutions becoming essentially ossified bureaucracies that then can be bought off, and they can make deals, and the masses are still then just brought along for the ride. But I'm really looking to see evidence of resistance within Venezuela, and I don't know how to get that evidence. And I know that it's there. Like, are you kidding me? Like, there wouldn't be mass protests in response to, like, even if you hated Maduro. I mean, just the insult. I mean, and that's the thing about this, is like, it's so infantilizing. It's infantilizing. The folks that are talking about like the colonial mindset, it's very extreme. It is a very extreme colonial mindset. Like, your leader is bad, we're just going to arrest him. Like, I would just be so insulted, even if I hated Maduro. So anyway, what that resistance in Venezuela actually looks like to me is very interesting, although I don't think it's big enough to force it into my news feed, but I think overall, the fact that the US is very much getting away with this, they're even going to get, like, Trump is going to get away with this within our own government, because the liberals are just going to complain about how he went about it. And, to me now, my main question to anybody who thinks Trump is such a tyrant is, what are you going to do about it? What are the Democrats actually going to do about it?
I have a question for people here. How many people listened to Trump, Hegseth, Marco Rubio at the Mar-a-Lago conference? Did anybody listen? I listened to it. Okay.
I heard clips on.
So,
but also, by the way, Marco Rubio has just talked about who's next, and it's Cuba.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah.
No, not just that. He said, well, and look, as humiliating as it would be to say, oh, we're just arresting your president, if everything that was said there at that press conference was like, we're running your country, Marco Rubio and Hegseth will be doing that, we'll decide when you get to have your own leader. That they said it outright. We've already talked with Delcy Rodriguez. She's all good. She's bought off. El Salvador, watch your ass. They literally said that. Cuba, essentially, watch your ass. And the other thing, and this is what Marco Rubio said today, and this gets to what Michael's saying. He told an NBC interviewer, we don't need a Venezuelan oil. We have plenty of oil in the United States. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. Why does China need their oil? Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? And by the way, Maduro was abducted kidnapped from that country only 6 to 7 hours after he had been visited by a Chinese person in government who had said, "Oh, it's all good." And so it is partially the idea that the U.S. needs to make itself independent for successfully fighting World War III, but it is mostly about making sure while it's fighting World War III, its opponents do not have access to any oil, and that it controls that oil that they can get to. So that's what that's about. But I can't express to you how humiliating the language, openly humiliating the language from the U.S. was, and that tells me that they've been having conversations with all the leaders of Chavismo and have a sense of what's below. And that has played out. And so I'm predicting that we're not going to see any occupations, we're just going to see the behind the scenes transfer of the straw being taken out of the mouth of Xi Jinping and put back into the mouth of Uncle Sam. And I actually think the economic boot is going to lift. And you are going to see people's situation get a little better than it was under the sanctions of the United States. The biggest money flows are back to the United States. But I do think they're going to create some space for Delcy Rodriguez and that regime to enrich themselves even more than they could under Russia and China, and at the same time deliver a little bit of relief to its population. That's what we'll see. And the last thing I'll say is, for me, the conclusion for as a socialist is we are always told, in response to our criticism of things like Chavismo is not socialism, China is not socialism, we're always told, "Oh, you're such a purist." And I'm going to say, for revolution, I think there's no alternative to that purity. I think politically, if we're going to go forward, we have no room to compromise on principles of working class independence, of working class control. There's no room for anything other than purity for the actual possibility of revolution. That's what I'm beginning to come to the conclusion to, because any lack of purity gets turned into that thing that we just saw in that picture, a celebration of somebody else coming in and controlling things.
It's obvious to me that the state is in control in Venezuela. Like the Venezuelan state. In the sense of like within the country, right? Like the U.S. has like its strings. It's obvious too, but I don't expect, unless I see a civil war within Venezuela, I don't see
Right.
any sort of resistance, right? Like, which, considering all the supposed preparations that they had done, and yeah, this was a surprise attack, and an elite force came in, blah blah blah, but I just think it's a wrap, and actually, it's a massive victory for the U.S. because I think unless Russia and China really like aggravate that situation, which I don't see how, because the Venezuelan state is in control by the nature of, even if there is mass protests that you were questioning, Michael, by my experience of being in Nicaragua, those mass protests are usually mobilized, that are in favor of the government, are usually mobilized by the state apparatus, right? Because in Nicaragua, when I lived there, the state was like employed like 40% of the workforce or some shit like that. And if you did not participate in any of those fucking demonstrations, you would be fired. So that's how a lot of these places operate. So I don't know for a fact if Venezuela operates that way. I know that Nicaragua absolutely did that. And so, like, what I'm saying is that I would question even whatever massive demonstrations, just like question that speech that Daisy Rodriguez did, right? Like, just to put a front to, just like I question even like the whole bombing. Like, they had to do that to show that the U.S. was fucking gonna do something. But there is no. They supposedly shot one fucking helicopter. I don't give a shit if they did block your air defense or whatever. There would have been more damage, right? If there was a battle fought back. So, and again, it's all a show. Like, to me, that's how I read it. And my point is that the U.S. Like, you gotta give it to them. There will be little consequence to this to them unless China and Russia are willing to engage and complicate this theater for them, which I actually don't think so. I don't think that's, I don't know, but the point is that the U.S. is yet another one off the board, right? Assad, fucking Maduro, whatever, Cuba is coming next, and so they are to me, they're not in a weak position right now. They're not. They're moving ahead. They're very aggressive, and but again, the inevitability of what's happening, there will be a confrontation. And again, Venezuela is not just a political message. It's not. To me, I still see this as a central part of the energy needs of the United States. Yes, the other people will get rich, whatever, but it's just that is a huge part of this equation. That if without energy sovereignty, or strategic energy control, the U.S. cannot move forward with these actions that they have to do. They have to be aggressive to push back, right, against these quote unquote BRICS, because there goes another massive BRICS like member, right? Like, and I actually think this is maybe another topic, that Brazil is being wrapped. Fucking Lula da Silva, after he was in jail, he's been a good dog actually. He's been a very good lapdog. He's not not the version that he used to be before he went to jail, and so he's already in the bag. Argentina's in the bag. So what the fuck? Where is BRICS? Tell me, where is BRICS now?
I also follow French news. I have my French community, and there are a lot of protests right now happening in Paris, burning U.S. American flags. And it's hard to understand European politics because it doesn't actually work on the left-right axis as it does in the USA. And I think it's interesting how Macron has come out and cheering what's happening, and what's happening with the regime change in Venezuela. But what I find striking is the far right, ultra right, Marine Le Pen, who is just coming out and saying, and I read it, there is, and I agree with her, even though I don't agree with other areas of her politics, there is one fundamental reason to oppose the regime change that the United States has just brought about in Venezuela. The sovereignty of states is never negotiable, regardless of their size, their power, or their continent. It is inviolable and sacred. But here it is. To renounce this principle today for Venezuela, for any state, would be to accept our own enslavement tomorrow. It would be thus be a mortal peril at a time when the 21st century is already the stage of a major geopolitical upheavals that cast over humanity the constant threat of war and chaos. Now, so that's, what I'm taking away from this is that this would be to accept our own enslavement tomorrow if we were to accept regime changes coming from other governing bodies, right? And you were speaking about purity, Andy. I had brought up some time ago the Rojava in Syria, which they did an anarchist. I'm going to criticize because I lean towards anarchism. It's more of what I think is a favorable sort of governing bodies that I would see in small communes and collectives around the world, and not in these grand nations with borders. I actually do think that there would be a more democracy, I don't know what the lack of a better word would be, I think would be interesting to see more of that happening. And I see that happening around the world in Asia. I see it happening around the world especially here in Mexico, especially in Michoacan, Guerrero, and Chiapas. Those are states of Mexico. And in Syria, you have the anarchists, the Rojava, who have been in civil war and have had troops on the ground and with ISIS, and this is to your point about purity, Andy. What I admired, because the Rojava are known and characterized by local council and decentralized government and explicit commitments to women's liberation, which is very different out there in Northern Africa, and multi-ethnic participation such as Kurds, Arabs, Syrians, Armenians, and secularism and communal self-administration. This is my Onyx, who's given me a hell. So he's just so inquieto, so restless. He just wants to go out. So, I was an admirer of the Rojava, and we talked about it. And then you criticized the Rojava, and we talked about it. And I really felt like you attacked my position there. I could not say to you at that time, I didn't have a basis. I didn't know how to fight, because you were right. They had this. They made a pact with the USA to use the troops on the ground to fight ISIS, and they had the guarantee, because they're Kurdish, that the Turks would not come in and have civil war with them. So USA was taking care of that, but do us this favor: fight ISIS. Because they were disciplined, because they had so many. This was 2014, 2015 people.
Yep.
And so the US needed a reliable ground to fight ISIS. They were highly disciplined, effective in urban warfare, and they were willing to coordinate with US air power. And the USA provided air support, weapons, training, intelligence, special forces, coordination, etc., etc., etc. And they provided ground troops, territorial control, and they prison management for thousands of ISIS fighters. And you also criticized that, and you called it detention centers. And I was really opposed to that at the time. I remember telling you, they're not detention centers. These are ISIS fighters. And you said, those are fucking detention centers. So I guess what I'm trying to say, this alliance, the military partnership against ISIS, was to benefit one another. It was a mutual short-term interest. And they never really formalized a treaty. But once the USA finished the Rojava, once they were done with them, suddenly they left them to their own devices. That was the one thing they said: well, we won't control you all, but we'll to leave you to your own devices. But we'll support Turkey, which will then invade you all, and you can deal with that in the aftermath. And so they did. And Turkey repeatedly invaded and occupied parts of the Rojava. Afrin, 2018. I don't know how to pronounce this. Serie Kaniye Aras Alien, 2019. These are the areas that they occupied. And what did the USA do? Limited response, limited protests, partial troop withdrawals, no military defense of Rojava against Turkey. And so this revealed the fragility and the cynicism of the alliance. And so I ask my Venezuelan people, which will do a podcast in Spanish, which Kenny is going to be part of, and I will say the same thing. Where do you see alliances that work? This is an example of what I had thought, what was it, Andy, when we discussed this 2018, of the Rojava, the anarchist project out there in northern Syria that I thought was admirable, no? And here the 2019 betrayal showed differently. So I try to say that to my friends, and what do they say? They say, I don't know. I have this discussion, and somehow for them it's not relatable because it happens in Northern Africa. It happens in the Middle East. I'm trying to stay away from the word Middle East, but Northern Africa, it happens out there. It's not that happens there. And someone showed a monument of Maduro being torn down. It was an AI thing, and I showed an actual picture of Saddam Hussein being taken down, the monument being taken down, and I'm like, this is what you want? 2003, I was at the anti-war protest in 2003. I was an adolescent. That's what you want? That looks like that's real shit happening. That's not an AI figure. And no one responded because, of course, they don't want to say something about that. But all right, fine, I give it to them. The folks, the Arabs, are different from the Latinos. All right, let's just look at the recent history. Honduras, 2009, the coup against Manuel Zelaya, backed by the USA. Paraguay, 2012, removal of Fernando Lugo, also backed with a coup of external support from who? The USA. 2016, removal of Dilma Rousseff, which we talked about. Who was also backing that? US-Brazil judicial cooperation in Operation Lava Jato. Bolivia, 2019, diplomatic support for the coup against Evo Morales. We talked about that. Remember that, Kenny? Cuba, continued economic blockade, right? But what happened in 1989? Panama as well. What happened with Chile, 1970? backed up coup against Allende, Pinochet. And so I invite folks, and that's what I'm going to bring up with them when we do it, when we have the panel of discussion. Where's the history that we forget, that repeats itself? And we all say that famous phrase, history repeats itself, history repeats itself. But there isn't anything that we forget it in moments of time like this. And so my Venezuelan people say, what? Well, what do we do about it, Eduardo? What do you expect us to do? I mean, I don't have the answers. That doesn't come from me. I don't think I'm the one to give out those answers. I think it comes as a collective brainstorming power that we have to build up together. But I think, and I'm not saying this because I'm Mexican, I really am trying to find other places, but I think there's one in Indonesia. But here in Mexico, there are self-governing bodies in Michoacan, in Guerrero, in Chiapas. And it's not going to be perfect, but definitely what I have seen happen in Michoacan, for example, in Cheran, residents there expelled illegal loggers, narco-linked groups, corrupt local politicians. They govern via assemblies. They have their own community security, and they reject political parties. They don't want support from the state. And this is considered one of the most successful cases, I think, of the autonomous self-government in Mexico. And so we have our episode to do about, guerrilla forces and the discussion of what to do then. Michael, what's his name? Michael, what? Not Michael, us, Michael
Caine.
What? Michael Caine has asked us, what then? And I have been asked that as well. People have said to me, aren't you proud that there's a Mexican president that's a woman? I'm not. I mean, there were 2 women running, and President Claudia Sheinbaum has said, well, I don't really believe that you should be voting for a woman because of their politics. Right. That's exactly why I did not vote for you in this past year, because I also didn't want to vote for a Morenista. So don't come to us saying to the Mexican people, we're supposed to be voting for, because there were 2 candidates, 2 women, and you said that you backed, back when AMLO was around, which I did vote for, back when AMLO was around, she voted, for AMLO, not for a woman, because she was on the other side of a party. So I'm exactly taking what Claudia Sheinbaum is saying. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, no, I'm not trying to dismiss the fact that there is this lingering question, what do we do then? That's a discussion we have to take. I just mentioned what these other people are doing in Guerrero as well. Funded in 1995, indigenous-led, assembly-based judicial system that include arrests, community re-educations instead of prisons. They also have rejected state help and fight against the narcos, and they take up machetes and arms. I mean, those are just examples. If Kenny, you come up with some, I don't know really the situation in Guatemala as you do, but there are so many other examples of small communities out there trying to do something and fight. I think that is where the investment would be in. And that's what I asked the Venezuelan people. Friends have said, we've done that. Yeah, I'm not saying you haven't, but it's a continuous struggle. It isn't like you end here and we're done. It's continuous. It's like when do you stop washing dishes? You wash dishes the rest of your fucking life. This is a struggle for the rest of your life. Like, it's a constant struggle. So this is my response to those areas: the purity, the disconnection with the Middle East, and what do we do about it? So those are my 2 cents.
I just want to say real quick, just to that question of what then, like I am as lost as anybody, but what I'm able to recognize more and more is not that shit. Not the Nicaragua, not the China, not the Brazil, not the US, obviously, and not the fucking Morena in Mexico, not the all this bullshit, like, and again, it's not like you said, it's not just up to me. What I'm becoming more sharp at is recognizing not that shit. I'm not gonna put my shit in that fucking energy. I'm not gonna put my energy in that shit. Because I've been misled in I know I'm a pawn in this game as everyone else is, and that's all I can say to right now, because obviously the fucking ground is dry as fuck. There is, and the circumstances are different in different places, right? These places might have more community than we do here. We can't even fucking look at each other in the eyes, for like more than 5 minutes without being distracted with a fucking phone. So I don't know. I think that what I'm trying to answer to myself at this point in my life is, what's a good life? Like what's a good life worth living for me? Do I follow my principles? And I will. I can't fucking shut the fuck up, and I will be isolated for that reason, but again, not that shit, that don't come and fucking tell me the same liberal or leftist shit, like I'm just tired of that. I'm tired of hearing the same old shit, and even like talking about destruction. I want to know, what the fuck are we going to construct? What am I fighting for? Like, it's obvious to me what I'm fighting against, like, but what am I fighting for? And so I don't know, uh, and the other thing is that I know that I'm not waiting for someone else to tell me. That's the fucking thing that I feel more people have to conquer. I can't wait for someone else to tell me. You have a part of it. You play a part in it. And we've been conditioned for so long to wait for leaders to tell us what to do. And so I'm building my own convictions, and analyzing whatever the fuck I have to try to live the rest of my life with good principles and make the best of it, and whatever comes that's not in my hands, I can't control. But like speaking my truth is something that I can't control. Even if I'm wrong now, and like I had to reanalyze later, that's one thing for sure that I know, that I have to speak what I believe, and I'm tired of the same old shit.
Well, we had a discussion what's left on about Operation Gladio 2.0 with John Kleisiger, Jake. He actually mentioned what he thinks the next step is. Does anybody remember what? I was surprised that he said it so readily. Michael, what did he say?
Cuba.
No, he didn't say that. He said general strike.
Oh, you mean in terms of resistance?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that Steve Zeltzer said that we haven't had. I don't know an answer, but I actually do think that that is probably the closest thing we're looking for that might indicate something's moving, is something of that order. The only thing I'll say is, if and when a country, our country, this country, or any country is able to have that general strike, any alliances it makes with the bourgeoisie or the middle class or ruling class to propel that general strike will come at a deep cost to the possibilities of anything going on. Political purity, political independence, if you want to call it that, is the only way to get from here to there. So if that general strike happens because we try to get permission from some section of the bourgeoisie, or some trade union apparatus tried to say, oh yeah, we can do that, all of that comes with a deep price that leads us back to either China or Russia or the United States putting its fucking straw in you. That's what I'll say. But I do think general strike is probably the thing we're talking about that might indicate that we're beginning that process that's leading us to something that can get us out of this mess. That's my feeling.
I wanted to make a comment about that because it looks like when when John said that, I'm like, yeah, in general, I sort of agree with this idea that, massive disobedience, people not going to work. However, that's like just a form, right? There's some inherent content to it, but it also looks like the UAW is organizing for a general strike in 2028,
right?
Calling for Democrats
But
to be
that's
elected,
that thing, right?
right? So the I feel like in my response to, I want to respond to this idea of purity, that you have to have purity. I've been thinking about Hegel a lot. I'm trying to learn more about this whole thing about Hegel and Marx, and I get annoyed with it because I think my framework for Hegel, for understanding their contribution, was just stuff that the physical sciences has already figured out, which is that the world is dynamic. You can't do one thing without affecting a bunch of other things. So this idea of purity to me is is an idealism, because what we really want is something that's actually effective, right? It's about what's going to actually win long term. What is being created, and how is it going to last? To me, those are the questions. And purity, this question of like political independence, to me, is fundamental to that. Like, are you going to be able to actually implement solutions to actual working class needs if you are tied to people who really want production for profit? Right? The fundamental class dichotomy is about, can we have all of this production and extract from it and make people rich, or are we going to produce basically to take care of people? And what emerges in these struggles over and over again, the pattern is basically a conflict between solutions that actually solve real human problems for working class people, or solutions that make it look like that basically pacify people so that they can continue to essentially extract, right? Like the straw you're talking about, right? So to me, the question of purity is really more a question of building something that's going to last, that's going to actually be effective. So this also means, though, that one of the problems with living in imperialism is that you can have really inspiring, free zones, right? And people often strive for that, and I love that. I'm so glad. I thought it was awesome you brought up the Yohava example, Eduardo, and the examples of like the autonomous zones. The problem is that under imperialism, all of those things, they can't last, which is why in previous generations of revolutionaries, they were like, we have to have essentially an international movement that internationally removes capitalists from power, that internationally knocks them out of control of the world's resources. And that's how we're going to get something that can last. And we're in a situation right now where there's no real assemblage of that, because I think what stands in its place is essentially the long road to socialism, which is essentially what BRICS represents to people, which is like, if we just stay out of the US's way and keep building our economies and build different development in different places, that we're going to eventually get to a place where we can be more humane, right? And to me, that's not an effective long-term thing. And here in Venezuela, we see why. The US will not let you, like, the imperialist competition means that your little project there is threatened. It doesn't mean your little project is somehow flawed, or that the purity of it, means that it's, or like, sorry. And when I say, I'm not trying to criticize you, Andy. I'm pointing out that there's a difference between this purity of ideas and then actual effective structure that lasts. So my question is, how can we build something that can actually last? And that question led me back through all of the history of the Russian Revolution and the second and third internationals, and there's a whole body of literature on how do we actually win and have it last. And now there's even less connectivity with that history, and it's not clear that there are people really trying to piece those lessons together on any scale that might actually pose a threat to this world order. So I'm not super hopeful, but I do think it's very important for us to try and figure out what's actually going on. And I really appreciate all three of your analysis, because I think I'm leaning much more towards realizing that and thinking that the U.S. working class is actually not, it's not moving to the left, or if there's, there's left has been disrupted, there's not a growing fight back. It's not there. We are not in a situation where people are becoming more militant.
Yep. And just because I think there's a whole discussion to be had about this, because I remember something Kenny said during a really impassioned speech you were making. You were like, fuck the dictatorship of the working class, of the proletariat, right? And I remember hearing that. And I was like, because I remember saying that this is something I'm founded in my Marxism, is fighting for the dictatorship of the proletariat. And I think that's what I mean by purity, is I want the dictatorship of the proletariat, not the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. I believe the dictatorship of the proletariat means freedom, liberty, all those things that will destroy the fourth industrial revolution and establish a possibly federated kind of existence, that possibility of humanity. And I'm not proving it. I'm just saying I believe that. But I think that's what it comes down to when I speak of purity. So,
And I just,
oh, okay, go ahead.
because what Michael is saying and what you're saying is kind of in what I've experienced, right, in Nicaragua, because I'm assuming that these projects have started with some intent. I'm assuming that, right? Like, they didn't set off. These socialist so-called projects started to, make something different. But that in that process, right, building something that lasts. Nicaragua has lasted. Venezuela has lasted. The socialist projects, right? And so that's what informs me, in questioning the fucking dictatorship of what in what shape. And you can call it that, but it's what I experienced, what I will fucking oppose. And I might die I probably would have died in those projects. If I had stayed in Nicaragua in 2018, because I wasn't on the ground, I might be shot. I might have been shot, okay, by the Socialist Democratic. And so that's why, it might be a semantical thing, but for me, it's a real thing of like, I don't want any substitute for what we have to fucking try to govern me and control me, right? Like, to force me to have a vaccine or force me to do that. I'll do it willingly if I believe in something, but not because someone is imposing shit on me. And whether they call themselves socialists or communists, I don't give a shit. And I'll be more watchful with people who label themselves that.
Yep. So there's a discussion just to have all about that. But one thing I want to add, because I want to make that one prediction out of what I think, because the show us Maduro thing that came from Delcy Rodriguez and came from the leader of the Constituent Assembly that said, "Oh, show us Maduro." The U.S. immediately showed them Maduro in cuffs and being walked, slow walked to prison. But I believe the trial of Maduro is going to be very useful for the United States, because I believe the U.S. is going to put China on trial. The corruption of the Maduro regime and its relationship to China and Russia is what's going to be put on trial. And I think that's going to be very beneficial. So we're going to see a lot of that stuff. I don't think it's going to be about drugs. I think it's going to, well, to the extent some about drugs, but I think the U.S. is going to put the relationship between Maduro and China on trial, which I think is going to be very useful for the United States.
Bookmarking that prediction.
Yep. And just noting again, we had another bookmark prediction about Vietnam and the new Vietnam. That was completely wrong. At least at this point, I'm just going to say.
And my claim is that it's too early to tell for sure.
Yeah.
Is that if a civil war does develop, then it'll look very much like Vietnam.
But in my prediction, I thought it was going to be like from the jump, ugly and get uglier. So all I'll say is that I did not think they could pull this little move off so cleanly, and in a way that does not require their occupation in order to actually reimpose political control over Venezuela. And I believe they're getting away with that.
And
looks like it.
and it looks like also the current regime, whatever the ones actually ruling right now in Venezuela, they're actually not in a good spot because they can make the population have more reasons to hate them, if they need to get rid of them.
All right. Well, this is a shout out to, as we're concluding, to anybody on What's Left that is listening that would like to join the Spanish version discussion. I'm very interested. I'm looking for folks. I have friends who say a lot. They don't want to join. A few are saying yes. We'll see if it happens. Kenny, we'll discuss coordination for times. But I do put this out there. Si quieren participar y quieren estar en la conversación de Venezuela, entonces díganme por favor desde ahora, comuníquense con nosotros. Be in communication with us. All right. So I think we'll conclude now. Thank you, everyone, for having this discussion. Thank you, Andy, for changing it up as well, because we were going to discuss New Year's resolutions, reflections, and whatever, but we didn't.
Yeah, this was good, and I appreciate the information you brought, Eduardo, about what folks were saying. It's I think it's I agree with it. Look, I agree with Michael that we don't know what we don't know, and we are always shown what they want to show us. But what you're saying, you're hearing from people around you. It's so far, it's not that different than what I'm seeing in the mainstream. So,
right. All right, let's conclude. All right, well, that does it for this week's episode. Join the lively discussion in the comment section if you must. If you would like to, I will check in there as well. What's Left is a weekly political podcast challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests and the episode notes where we found this episode or on our blog at whatifpodcast.com. I'd like to say to Michael's comment that I'm sorry for criticizing you, Andy. This is a criticism. You can always criticize Andy anytime, and you should. And you can find past episodes to this podcast last channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, including my criticisms with Andy, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes, Podcast, Bitch, Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. You can also find our site to any of those links in the episode notes where we found this episode. I don't know why I'm not thinking. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog at our site. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Kenny Cepeda, Andy Lipson, Michael Hoffman. Thank you all very much. Thank you all for listening as well. Check us out next time. Ciao.